le 23 octobre 2007. Je suis à la recherche du Canada sur la carte. Elle y était bien présente autrefois, si grand, si rose, un cœur disproportionné battant tout contre le cœur d'un géant endormi. Mais ce battement de cœur est presque imperceptible à présent, et si inégal. Il s'en va et revient sans que personne ne s'en rende compte. Je ne parviens pas à accepter ce qu'il arrive à ce pays. La position du Canada sur la scène internationale est en train de dépérir. Même si nous bénéficions toujours d'une certaine bonne volonté basée sur nos contributions militaires, diplomatiques et de maintien de la paix, dans l'ensemble, notre valeur est sur le déclin. Je veux créer une nouvelle vision pour le Canada, basée sur ce que nous sommes en tant que pays et parce que ce nous étions il y a 50 ans.
Canada's World is a 3-year citizens dialogue that aims at engaging untraditional voices in Canadian foreign policy.
Le 3 décembre 2007. Quand des gens me demandent comment Canada Monde a débuté, c'était vraiment simple. Nous avons discuté avec des gens, beaucoup de gens à travers le pays. J'ai interrogé plus de 200 personnes et nous avons organisé 14 tables rondes et un dialogue sur Facebook. Nous leur avons demandé ce qu'ils pensaient de la position internationale du Canada, d'identifier les nouvelles réalités auxquelles le Canada fait face dans le monde. Ces conversations nous ont permis de façonner Canada Monde et nous ont fourni les 8 principes pour aller de l'avant.
Au Canada, nous n'avons pas tellement d'espace public où nous pouvons nous réunir en tant que citoyens. Nous n'avons pas non plus de médias que nous regardons tous ou que nous lisons tous, de héros auxquels nous identifions tous. Nos vies sont devenues très fragmentées et déconnectées les unes des autres. Chez Canada Monde, nous savions que si nous voulions développer une nouvelle vision du Canada dans le monde, il nous faudrait surmonter cette fragmentation et créer des espaces où des gens de tous les pays, de tout horizon, de toute culture, de toute génération, traditions religieuses et perspectives politiques pourraient se retrouver sur le même pied d'égalité pour apprendre, discuter et délibérer.
I'm very much of the view that foreign policy is not about experts, diplomats, and corporate CEOs deciding together in Davos what the future of the world should be. If it's going to be a real foreign policy, it has to be tied to your domestic priorities, and it has to be tied to what values we share as a country. And those values are not just to be expressed by white guys over 50. It's got to be a broader expression that reflects the community as a whole. And one of the great things about this particular project is that it reached out and sought to involve a whole new generation in foreign policy development and ideas and aspirations to set a higher standard for people in politics and in foreign policy, and to talk about a changing of the guard, both intellectually and in terms of generations themselves.
La politique étrangère dans un État, c'est presque toujours des décisions qui sont prises au sommet, avec assez peu de consultations, parfois les parlementaires, mais c'est l'affaire du ministre, du premier ministre, ça se passe souvent en secret, et les citoyens apprennent ce qui se passe en politique étrangère en écoutant les nouvelles. Alors que le processus de Canada Monde, de panel, de discussion en profondeur, permet d'avoir une idée de ce qu'un public informé dit, bon, ben maintenant que je suis mieux informé, voici ce que je pense qu'on devrait faire, voici ce que je pense de ce qu'on fait, et puis ça permet de voir quelles sont les valeurs principales que les citoyens canadiens et québécois aimeraient voir portées par l'État, et là, voir le décalage qu'il y a entre la politique étrangère réelle et la politique étrangère souhaitée.
Here down, based on the distance in kilometers or whatever, where you were born in relationship to Pier 21. So figure out where you fit on that line. Haligonians are going to be coming over here. It's going to get really quaint.
We have people from all over the world in our country. And unlike 100 years ago or 125 years ago, when the government of the time invited Eastern Europeans to come and fill up the vast expanse of the Canadian West and basically told people, you know, fit in. And then those people really lost connection with home. Well, today, given globalization of commerce of people, the mobility of people and so on, and advanced technology, people are connected to home instantly. And so you realize there's all this energy, all this knowledge. They know the language, they know the culture. When it comes then to foreign aid or trying to help other parts of the world solve their problems, we have a natural resource here, motivated, well-educated, and who are defining their being good Canadian citizens as being citizens of the world.
So many Canadians are, as Canada's World has put it, globally connected. And what does that mean? Tapping into these globally connected Canadians as a way of informing the kind of work, not only in terms of our foreign policy, but in terms of the international work that Canada does. I think that's incredibly important.
So it wasn't just the old debate, the old dichotomy is, foreign policy is about, interests, it's about power. Oh, no, foreign policies, no, it's about values. This coming together of we have interests, we have values, and we have assets. And in order for us to be holistic and to think in a more innovative way, we need to bring those three together.
Debate is when you don't agree, but a dialogue when you sit around the table and share information with one another.
Great, Dolly, that's perfect. A debate is often when you don't agree. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm going to find out how I can convince you of my position. And a dialogue is much more about finding the center in an argument. Anything else on debate and dialogue?
The difference between dialogue and debate, as Canada's World defines it, is a very important nuance. What is meant by a dialogue is a deliberate attempt at tearing away parts of hierarchical structures that divide people on the basis of their work, on the basis of putting one experience over and above another. If Canadian citizens in general are going to have a say in foreign policy, they need to know that anybody, regardless of what you do or what you don't do, has as much a right to weigh in on foreign policy as anyone else.
I've heard a lot of government and us and government and us. Government is us.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you get caught up in this and this, you create a barrier that really does not need to exist. So together, we can do these things. Right?
One of the stellar strengths of Canada's World was its non-partisan approach. It really did not come from any particular political party or persuasion. It involved people from all different political perspectives, and it allowed us to take a look at foreign policy as Canadians rather than as liberals or conservatives or NDPers or any particular dogma.
Le projet a été vraiment une réussite dans son objectif premier d'aller chercher la population canadienne à tous les niveaux, de tous les âges, de partout dans le pays. Et donc, quelque part, le Canada, malgré son multiculturalisme, le fait qu'on vient de partout dans le monde, je suis moi-même une immigrante, etc., ce n'est pas le Canada si on n'inclut pas de manière systématique et sérieuse les Québécois et le Québec, les Premières Nations et les autres communautés. Et je pense que c'est une erreur de penser seulement français, anglais. Je pense qu'il y a de plus en plus d'importants blocs régionaux et qu'il faut être capable vraiment de leur donner à tous une voix.
Let's do another show of hands who has a Twitter account. Okay, so we've got a few tweeters.
So one of the biggest influences for Canada's World from the start was the emergence of the open source and Creative Commons community. And really this movement is about transparency and about making things democratic. So opening your information up to the public and really allowing regular citizens to be a part of your process.
Le 3 février 2008. Demain, notre sondage Canada Monde paraîtra. J'ai vraiment apprécié de travailler avec Michael Adams et Véronique sur cette enquête d'opinion. Ceci dit, j'aurais souhaité que nous remettions le lancement après le super mardi. Il est difficile de rivaliser avec Barack Obama.
To the best of my knowledge, this is the first time that we actually looked at Canada's engagement with the rest of the world on the basis of how are all of us engaging with the world. We tried to gauge the quality, the depth, the frequency, and the meaning of that engagement with the rest of the world, both in terms of family connection, cultural connection, commercial connections, and so on. When we calculated, on the basis of our survey, the amount of remittances to family, contributions to NGOs and other organizations, when you add up Canadians' engagement with the rest of the world, you were looking at something well over $20 billion. Well, that's 6 times or more what we officially are, as a country, spending on improving things in the rest of the world. We've moved from the era of just deferring to government to express our values to us expressing our own values.
Le 14 février 2008, je passe la Saint-Valentin à Calgary. C'est la première des 8 sessions qui auront lieu d'une côte à l'autre du pays. 2 seront en français et 6 en anglais, chacun avec 30 participants et chacun durant 2 jours et demi. La préparation des sessions nous a demandé les guides de dialogue, les 9 guides de discussion, le site web, recrutement des animateurs, la du processus, la script des animateurs, la logistique, expliquer leurs tâches aux preneurs de notes. Dieu merci, nous avons Mary Pat McKinnon et Elodie Jacquet.
Alors le processus d'un dialogue régional, pas par pas, c'est d'abord un processus de recrutement, donc plusieurs heures, voire plusieurs semaines de recrutement à l'avance pour obtenir un panel de gens de tous bords, de tous âges, de toutes origines.
We really wanted this to be a reflection of the diversity of the Canadian population. So we used a method called random digit dialing, which is basically the same method used for public opinion research.
When you're actually approaching them to participate in a dialogue, sometimes people might feel that they don't really have anything to contribute, often because they don't think they know very much about the issue. It's really important to communicate, especially to citizens, that what we're really trying to uncover is the values behind the issues in question. All citizens have values to bring to the table, and they also all have life experiences to bring to the table.
The dialogue over 2.5 days took people through a process of learning, generating ideas, rethinking, coming to sort of some sense of individual reflection and then group reflection and then re-reflection in light of what they've heard from their fellow participants, and then trying to sort of make sense of it by landing on kind of the policy directions that they think Canada should be moving in.
It is not someone talking at you. It's not an expert telling you this is how it is, or this is what I think, and that's how it should be done. Actually, your opinion is very much sought after.
Most of the forums and sessions where I've attended, people tend to be careful or afraid of expressing themselves. But each Canada World Forum or session I attended, that's one of the first things they tell us. So be free, feel free to express yourself.
Dans la plupart des activités, soit dont j'ai entendu parler ou que j'ai moi-même vu, il y avait des vieux et des jeunes, des universitaires, des non-universitaires, des personnes de milieux très différents, mais qui avaient toutes envie de participer et de se faire entendre. Et être capable de les mettre ensemble et d'avoir des dialogues assez profonds entre ces personnes-là, sans qu'il n'y ait nécessairement un sentiment que certains groupes dominent parce qu'ils en savent plus ou bien parce qu'ils sont mieux articulés, plus capables d'exprimer leur position. Ça, je trouve que ça a été très très bien, ça a été une belle réussite.
À la fin du dialogue, il faut aussi faire un rapport qu'on leur envoie, leur demander leur feedback quand c'est possible et puis souvent les solliciter à nouveau pour la suite du projet, pour d'autres dialogues ou simplement leur demander d'organiser leur propre dialogue dans leur communauté.
You have to be systematic about how you can report back to the citizens that participated, the people that you're trying to have the conversations with, the decision makers, people in civil society, the business community, government, and you can't do that unless you're able to accurately capture, record, analyze, and then, give back in accessible reports.
Whatever is being said by each one of these people is actually written down by them and stuck on the board.
It's like a sort of interactive brainstorming session where you just stick stuff up on the wall. The facilitator will go through it with you and sort of bring it together under these like sort of categories, so you're seeing the report writing taking place and you're a part of it.
C'est très subjectif ce que les gens peuvent dire. Donc, en fait, ma formation scientifique m'a permis de prendre du recul par rapport à ça et de vraiment comptabiliser mot par mot ce que les gens avaient dit, de catégoriser en quelque sorte leurs propos et de réussir à tirer de ces propos une analyse quantifiable des propositions qu'ils avaient à faire.
When you read that record on the website or anywhere else, you say, yes, I remember that sentence, and it was actually stated by that guy who comes from Ghana, who happened to be sitting at the table with me. In other words, it's not something that Shauna said, it's not something that some big shot said, no, it's the people there.
Jusqu'ici, le projet a reçu plus de 100 articles publiés et du reportage à la télévision. Nous remarquons cependant un changement dans le monde des médias. Il y a plus en plus de jeunes qui se tournent vers les blogs et les ressources en ligne pour s'informer. J'ai vu mes propres habitudes changer. Je reconnais qu'il sera difficile de projeter efficacement ce que nous faisons dans des médias aussi fragmentés. Cela implique que Canada Monde devrait vraiment améliorer son engagement en ligne.
We used a full range of online tools, most of them available for free or for cheap.
We've always tried to be at the forefront of using whatever new tools come out.
We had a multi-author blog that was a really big success for us. We were looking for bloggers, people who wanted to come and blog about different foreign policy issues from a non-expert perspective. It exceeded my expectations in terms of the quality of the posts, the quality of the conversation that the bloggers were having in the comments section. There's really a sense that they created a little community there.
On our website is a really rich variety of materials. We've put all of our different dialogue handbooks online.
People were able to post comments in discussion forums.
We have a citizens timeline that's basically a history of Canada as citizens see it. And anyone can go to that timeline on our website and upload to the wiki what they think is important in history.
We had a very lively Facebook group where there was a conversation going on about lots of different subjects.
We have a Twitter group that's really active. We have a lot of followers, and we really like to engage with people on Twitter because that's kind of the next generation of, online dialogue.
This sort of connection to the digital age that the project had was a really, really neat way of engaging people with, of course, no cost and a diversity of Canadians across the country.
Je ne crois pas qu'il y ait un mot ou une phrase que nous n'ayons pas examiné. Et bien qu'une vision claire se dégage de tout ce travail, il est difficile de mettre des mots dessus. Je dois rencontrer Daniel Savas d'Ipsis Read aujourd'hui pour faire une revue de nos recherches. Il va s'assurer que tout ce que nous compilons soit cohérent avec ce que nous avons entendu venant des Canadiens. La pression est forte car notre vision doit aller à la traduction et l'impression avoir que nous la présentions le 30 janvier à Ottawa lors de notre dialogue national. Et si cette vision que 4000 Canadiens ont aidé à façonner ne leur parlait pas? Et si j'étais tout pour te recommencer à zéro?
Try to imagine receiving a very large pile of papers, and it was your job to kind of read through the entire thing and try to create a summary of it. And that's essentially what the National Dialogue was.
The National Dialogues was taking the work that had been done in the regional dialogues and trying to coalesce it into some core themes that could get used to help to generate a vision in terms of how Canadians saw what Canada's role in the world should be.
The National Dialogue brought together people of all different backgrounds from all across Canada, all different professions and fields.
I think I was one of two people in the 60s. And everybody else was kind of teenagers or people who were about 30 or 25. So at first I thought maybe it won't work out. However, to my great surprise, it worked out very well.
Beaucoup de points de vue différents sur un sujet et tous ces gens ont pu s'asseoir et expliquer pourquoi je pense comme ça et voilà d'où je viens et voilà mon expérience qui m'amène à penser comme ça. Et l'autre personne en face a pu débattre de l'opposé de ce point de vue-là, mais avec un respect.
The fact that we were all able to share such close, intimate feelings and passions and emotions, it definitely created a bond. But at the end, I think that we were all just very proud of what we had achieved together. We sat on top of all this information, and finally all these people were able to come together and say, okay, I think these are the themes that we see coming out of this, and how is it that we can now take this and condense it in a form that we can hand it to somebody.
I was working as a note taker in some of the dialogue groups, which really made me listen very closely to what people were saying because I had to transcribe everything. Having these really active discussions that would just go in directions that I would not have predicted was amazing, especially as a student of political science. It was really interesting to see some theoretical principles just like come to life.
Le 6 avril 2009, nous en sommes à notre seconde impression de le rapport de notre dialogue national. Nous avons décidé que ce rapport ne suffisait pas à avancer notre nouvelle vision. C'est un peu ennuyeux pour notre plus jeune audience. Les participants à notre dialogue des femmes leaders nous ont suggéré de créer une courte vidéo qui utiliserait le métaphore pour décrire notre vision. Un de nos stagiaires a créé une petite animation, mais nous avons besoin d'un autre genre de vidéo pour atteindre notre audience sur YouTube.
So the process of trying to take our 2 years of dialogue and consultation and turn it into a video was a really complicated one, but a really incredible one. That was the point in the project at which we realized that we really wanted to focus on successes and make people feel more optimistic about Canada's role in the world.
Pendant qu'il travaille sur le script, je vais de nouveau faire mes valises pour un voyage de plus à Ottawa pour rencontrer les officiels du gouvernement. Je crois que c'est le 3e ronde de rencontres avec chacun des partis politiques.
One of the dilemmas of the work in dialogue, particularly citizen dialogue, is what I call the translation of the results of citizen dialogues into language that policymakers and decision makers understand. Early on, Canada's World made a choice. I think it probably was the right choice, but it meant that challenge was hard, and that choice was that it was a citizen-led process. The framing of the issues and things weren't necessarily the way government might have framed them in order to be able to fit it into their policy-making process. So that dilemma of translation of results, if you like, was probably bigger than it might have been if it had been a government-led or had government as a key partner.
Je ne suis pas persuadée que nous ayons pénétré les médias grand public. Par contre, nous voyons vraiment un impact sur la toile.
I came in right around the time when Back on the Map was about to be launched. So I did the press releases and I was contacting media to try and get the story of the report out just because it was the culmination of a lot of work from Canada's World.
Overall, we've really tried to be a part of the media and get them interested in our process.
Le buzz suite à notre dialogue national se poursuit. Nous recevons tellement de sollicitations pour donner des ateliers.
Les équipes de Canada Monde ont traversé le pays à plusieurs reprises pour rencontrer des groupes de Canadiens. Au total, nous avons été impliqués dans plus de 150 événements, sans compter les tables rondes organisées par certains dans leur propre communauté.
Le 28 septembre 2009, je viens juste de rencontrer 2 de nos stagiaires. Ce semestre, nous avons 13 stagiaires travaillant dans des universités à travers le pays. Et tout le monde travaille sur notre camp de politique étrangère. Les stagiaires de Montréal, Toronto et Edmonton organisent des camps satellites à notre camp principal qui aura lieu à Vancouver le 30 novembre. Je suis un peu inquiète de cette forme de camp, mais les jeunes semblent aimer cette idée et cela génère déjà un sacré buzz. Canada Monde appelle à changer la façon dont nous engageons les citoyens et cette idée de camp démontre une forme bien plus ouverte et transparente. J'aimerais tant de ne pas être si réfractaire au progrès. À chaque nouvel outil virtuel, je hoche la tête. Mais qu'est-ce qu'une mashboard?
I suggested that Canada's World do a foreign policy camp because I'd been involved with a few camps before. The idea behind a camp is that there's very little preset agenda and lots of opportunity for participants to come in and say, this is what we want to talk about today, this is what we want to do, and let's collaboratively figure this out together. And because Canada's World was so much about emphasizing citizen participation and openness and citizen decision-making, it was just such a perfect fit.
I remember us staying up really late the night before and crazily planning last-minute things and thinking the whole time, what if no one shows up? And on the day of, it was packed.
Going down just before it started, hundreds of people in the room, all full of energy and excited. But the most notable thing was how many of them were young.
The range of people, the socioeconomic range, the age range, the gender diversity, the ethnocultural diversity was terrific.
I saw people who were obviously unsure of what to expect of a certain older generation sitting next to somebody who looked like they were from high school. And suddenly you hand out these boom whackers and everybody's wondering what's going on.
I have to admit that I was very reluctant to embrace the whole camp idea at the beginning because I couldn't understand, what, you're going to have 400 people come and you're not going to have an agenda and it's just going to kind of throw people in and it'll be decided on the spot. As the time went by and I got to know the people and we became a little more comfortable and saw the value in the process, I'd like to think that I embraced it wholeheartedly.
There was a tone that was set that made, I think, a lot of people who often wouldn't want to speak in those kinds of forums feel comfortable doing that, and feel comfortable doing that in a way that was meaningful and that actually added to the discussion.
Well, that Afghanistan roundtable was really something else. The pretty genuinely eclectic group of people Canada's World was able to bring together into that boardroom and sort of render titles not irrelevant. People knew who was with who and stuff, but rendered them less important.
The Asia Pacific Foundation organized the Asia Pacific Foreign Policy Case Study. It's almost unprecedented to have that kind of sustained dialogue for, a couple hours with such a mixed bag of people talking about the unifying question, how do we get Asia on the mental map of Canadians?
The new media component of it was really a defining feature.
We used Ustream, live video streaming. We used live wikis for note-taking. We had a Twitter hashtag that everyone was using to engage with the camp, even people that weren't there. All of our photos were being uploaded to our Flickr pool immediately so people could see different photos as they were happening. We got people from all over Canada to write on these little pieces of paper what their most important foreign policy concern was, and we got a lot of different answers that were really interesting.
And there was also a survey on Canada's role and leadership in the world in various regards.
We had graphic facilitators that were facilitating through art all of the results of our online citizen survey.
My company, Magenta, created a software application that we call Mashboard. The survey results were presented on the Mashboard, the Twitter comments were presented on the Mashboard, and those discussions were amalgamated into one single place and then graphically represented to show what the cumulative conversation was.
The whole concept behind mixing the experts and the non-experts, bringing up your own topics. Once again, the theme of Canada's World gave voice to people who probably wouldn't have talked in the first place.
The closing ceremonies at Foreign Policy Camp, when we were all up on stage, there was a kind of a sense of, yeah, we did it.
Le 27 janvier 2010, nous avons maintenant rencontré chacun des partis politiques 4 fois. Notre but est de communiquer des vues des Canadiens à ceux qui tiennent la plume à Ottawa. Ils nous ont prêté une oreille attentive, mais l'engagement des citoyens ne semble pas pour autant une priorité de l'administration actuelle. Nous avons reçu de bons retours sur notre vidéo. Plus de 10 000 l'ont déjà visionné via des projections publiques ou en ligne. Je me demande combien d'entre eux reconnaîtront la valeur du message central de cette vision. que le Canada devrait mener par l'exemple, à promouvoir une économie verte, encourager l'innovation, améliorer l'égalité, promouvoir la bonne gouvernance et embrasser la diversité. Nous sommes presque à la fin de notre projet et je reçois des appels et des courriels de personnes à travers les pays qui ne veulent pas voir se terminer Canada-Monde. Le processus a eu un profond impact. Quand nous avons démarré ce projet, j'espérais que nous plantirions une graine qui ne donnerait probablement pas de fruits avant 30 ans, mais je vois déjà des pousses émerger.
Canada's World is a great first step because the first step towards people sort of changing foreign policy is people believing that they can.
To come into a foreign policy dialogue group as a young woman and be able to take on significant amounts of responsibilities really showed me that it is possible to bring about a change in the way that we think about politics, especially in Canada.
As someone who wishes and continues to wish that Canada had a bigger role in the current world, it was sort of hopeful for me to see the way that we can still arouse passion and that we aren't as apathetic as I thought we were.
Je crois que la leçon de ce processus, c'est qu'on peut poser des questions complexes aux citoyens lambda et il sera capable d'arriver avec des réponses aussi complexes, aussi riches et aussi surprenantes peut-être que certains politiciens, ces politiciens n'arriveront jamais à la hauteur de cette richesse et de cette complexité-là.
A process like Canada's World that intentionally is reaching out to these non-traditional groups. It's often as valuable, if not more valuable, than what the experts bring to the table because it's fresh and it doesn't come from a particular point of view that might have been predicted in advance.
There's going to be impact a year, 2 years, maybe 10 years from now, 100 years from now. But there's already been a huge impact. And what it's been is that demonstration that people do genuinely care about democratic process, that they may have not participated up until this point to the extent that they've wanted to because those opportunities have not been available. We've certainly produced something very effective here and a process that people want to be involved in.
The fact that you were able to engage the number of people who got engaged in the Canada's World process suggests to me that that is one of its key strengths, that it is an engagement tool that can work and probably should be replicated on a whole number of different policy issues, not just limited to Canada's foreign policy.
We're used to the government setting up, a royal commission on this, that, and the other thing when it thinks it's got a big problem. And here's a case where the citizens got together, found resources, which was self-organizing. It was networking rather than the hierarchy and everybody giving orders or taking orders and so on. It was very interactive. It got a lot of people engaged, thoughtfully engaged, that is quite unusual. And so it's kind of like the People's Royal Commission on Canada's place in the world. I think it's unprecedented in this country.
Je pense qu'on leur a rendu un service en rappelant à tout le monde que la citoyenneté, c'est en fait quelque chose que l'on ne fait pas seulement aux élections, c'est quelque chose que l'on fait en participant au débat, en donnant son opinion, en s'impliquant dans des activités comme celle-ci qui sont des activités complètement gratuites pour lesquelles on n'a pas de rémunération. Et qu'en fait la rémunération importante, c'est celle qui vient après lorsque l'on voit que notre gouvernement nous écoute et développe des politiques qui répondent à nos intérêts et à nos engagements éthiques et moraux.
There was a real empowerment function for me, opening up both the NGO world and the government world to kind of listen more to citizens' voices and take those voices into account.
I would like to think that when someone is appointed Foreign Affairs Minister for the first time and he or she is told by the department we have, briefing books for you to read, it'd be nice to think of a Foreign Affairs Minister who say, what, before the briefing books, I'm going to go out to high schools, college campuses, and I want to ask the people for whom we are all working, who are going to inherit this country, what do they think? What are their views? I like to get their views first before I get the briefing books and all that stuff. That would be a good thing, and that's what I think this process has been so instrumental in achieving.
Le 3 mars 2010, Les Jeux olympiques sont terminés. Comme beaucoup de gens, je ne sais pas ce qui m'est arrivé. Pendant 2 semaines, nous avons trouvé nos voix de Canadiennes, nous nous sommes montrés et nous avons fait la fête. Il y a 3 ans, j'écrivais que j'entamais un voyage de découverte pour retrouver le battement de cœur de notre pays et l'amplifier au-delà de nos frontières. Mais ces 3 dernières années m'ont montré que ce battement de cœur est en pleine forme. Ce sont les outils que nous utilisons pour l'écouter qui ne fonctionnent pas. Canada Monde, cette étonnante expérience en développement démocratique, était la première étape pour définir un espace où les citoyens pourraient mettre en avant leurs idées pour remettre le Canada sur la carte. Maintenant vient la seconde étape. S'assurer que notre pays soit à la hauteur du défi et assurer la communauté internationale que le monde compte pour le Canada et que le Canada compte pour le monde.
Mm-hmm.